David Clark.
Mr Chair, in Part 3 of this bill, as my colleague, the Honourable David Cunliffe, was saying, are a variety of broader definition of income descriptions, much the same as in Part 2. I mean, there are here also definitions that are about broadening income. And he was mentioning the annual gross income and making the point that New Zealanders know a lot about that because it has been dropping in real terms under this government. And wages in this country are indeed a big issue for New Zealanders in the light of rising costs and a government that is not growing the economy. Now, Clause 65 provides the new definitions of income, and they are broader. And that is indeed the intention of the legislation, to broaden the definitions of income, to collect the extra $1 million per annum of revenue from 2015-2016 onwards, which is captured in this Part 3 of the Act, where it is amendments to the Principal Act that apply for the 2014-15 and later tax years. And so that is where we see this really taking effect, albeit, again, as has been pointed out by numerous members of this House, very small piecemeal measures and in many ways a lost opportunity. The other point I have made is that in this bill we see many measures which are repealing earlier decisions taken by this government, measures that in most cases have been repealed because they've proven too difficult to implement or too costly to implement when faced with an aged computer system that was built 20 years ago and for which the government has not yet outlined a credible plan to rebuild. And I'm still hoping the Minister and the Chair will at some stage address our concerns about the ability of the government to implement these changes and outline a credible a credible timeline and plan for replacing this aged, decrepit system which is proving incapable of implementing government policy. It's a serious concern that could see billions of dollars in government revenue not able to be collected in future. And further on in Part 3, we see also some amendments relating to the repeal of provisions on the 10% bonus. And this is something that we've seen also debated in the House previously, where this Minister, having introduced a 10% repayment bonus for students, has discovered that it was not a very effective policy and has repealed it latterly. Yet another U-turn. And we see in these U-turns, on the one on the car park tax, the upcoming one on the cell phones, the ones in this bill relating to measures that can't be implemented, and indeed the repealing of provisions around the 10% bonus, a pattern emerging of 2 steps forward, 3 steps backwards. And that's no way to run a government. That is no way to run a government. We need to see a government that is taking bold measures in the tax area, that instead of debating how we're going to collect that extra $1 million, is considering the bigger issues that are facing our economy. For example, around the investment signal for export-led growth, the kind of change that a capital gains tax would make for the benefit of our economy, to see our economy grow, to see it compete with overseas countries, whereas right now we're one of very few countries that doesn't have such a measure in the OECD. I come back to the provisions in the bill, Mr Chair, because I think it's very important to stick to the clauses that are before us in this particular part of the bill, and I'm sure that you, Mr Speaker, will agree with me on that. We see that in clauses 67 and 68 we have clauses relating directly to that repeal of provisions of the 10% bonus, another failure on the government's part to implement policy, and then it's being forced here and through this legislation to withdraw it again. All of these measures that are ultimately positive, we support. That's why overall Labour will support the bill, because we believe that the changes that are substantive in here will make the repayment of student loans fairer. We recognise that it's pretty humiliating for the government to be having to pass a good deal of measures that are repealing earlier measures that it brought through the House thinking that they were improvements. And we of course, have made a little sport of that, but we have concern that the Parliament is wasting time where it could actually be making bigger and better decisions for New Zealand.
I'll call Dr. Meakin Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In part